Sasha, and I am once again coming to you live from right here in Israel and talking to you about stuff. And in this particular video, I talk to you about the Israel Hamas war that has been raging for 2 years and whether or not it actually is finally going to be over with the expected return of all of the hostages apparently by tomorrow or maybe Tuesday. And there might be some delays to return some of the missing bodies that Hamas says they don't know where they are. But apparently, there's going to be some kind of a team to work on finding them. It's rumored that it'll be some kind of international team. Details are not fully clear on that yet. But in any case, that's supposedly the first stage of the plan. But actually, if you look at the plan, that is not the first point on the plan. The first point on the plan is probably the thing that's going to take the longest time to achieve. And that is why I'm talking to you about whether or not this war is actually over when the hostages are returned home. And the answer is no, that alone would not suffice. The Hamas still needs to surrender their weapons and give up power. That is a key point in Israel's kinetic fight, because we do not want to have to be in the same war again with these people again in another 5, 10, or 15 years. And that's exactly what's going to happen if they don't surrender their weapons and lay down their power and surrender their power to another entity. And if they just transfer their power to some other organization that they create, which they've already done, by the way, they've already created other organizations to, act as some kind of a fake new organization that's supposedly not Hamas, but it's run by all the same people. then that would not change a thing, or that would not help the situation, because it would just be, some other organization in name only. I'm gonna go talk to this dog over here. Shall I give her shalom? Shall I give her shalom? אני חושב. Hello. איזה חמוד. איזה חמודה. שלום לך, שלום לך, חמודה. A cute little beagle. A very snoopy dog. Barking, talking to me. I love dogs. Anyway, the Hamas, if they just create a new organization, and they just basically, shift everybody to that, will not obviously be satisfying the necessary point of the plan, which is that they have to lay down their weapons and step away from power. They can't just be the same organization, or practically the same organization with practically identical goals, which is still to this day to destroy Israel and kill all the Jews in Israel and kill all the people in Israel, regardless of whether they're Jewish or not, right? And hunt down Jews all over the world, etc. All that nonsense that they have in their insane psychopathic ideology. That's not going to fly, right? That may get you may get politicians who will try to pretend like that's enough of a change, but reality on the ground says that's not going to fly. If you actually want this to end, if people actually want this conflict to end, that organization needs to cease to operate, and they need to specifically leave the scene. And the problem is they're not going to do that. And like I said, this isn't even the first point on the plan. Read it. Go ahead. See for yourself what is the first point on the plan. You will notice the first actual point on the plan is to de-radicalize the Gaza Strip. What does that mean? Well, that's a very long and slow process. It's not an overnight process. It takes at least years. And in the case of Gazans, it may take a generation or 2 or 3, because they've been at this hateful ideology nonsense for many generations. And yes, you do have example cases like, Mossab Hassan Youssef, who have demonstrated the ability to de radicalize themselves within a couple of years of sitting in an Israeli prison and seeing how badly Hamas treats each other. But you also have the vast overwhelming majority of them who do go through the prison system, the ones that are arrested for whatever reasons, usually violent crime or terrorism related, um, and they do not de-radicalize themselves, despite seeing what Hamas does to each other, and that by comparison, Israel treats them extremely well. Like from that point of view, yeah. So, is it possible that we're going to see Gazans just suddenly de-radicalize themselves without any great effort? No, it will definitely require an enormous effort. It's not something that's just going to happen overnight. There's just no way. It's line one on the plan is going to take the longest to do. Because implementing international forces to oversee whatever, that's all little technical details. Who's going to do what? What is their chain of command going to be? What is their mission going to be? What will they actually be doing practically? The U.S. is supposedly going to be sending um, troops not to Gaza, but like CENTCOM is going to be basically staffing some troops to monitor the progress of the plan. But again, they're not sending anybody to Gaza, so don't get your panties all in a bunch if you're one of these people who's like, well, we don't want to send American boots to... You're not sending American boots to Gaza. Okay? You're not sending American troops to Gaza. That's not happening. Israel hasn't asked for it. Nobody wants that, right? But they're going to help monitor the progress of the plan. Wonderful, great. That's a small technical detail, okay? But to actually get Gazans to de-radicalize, that takes educating an entire population to stop being hateful and psychopathic in their ideology. And I know not every Gazan is a psychopath. Thank you very much. I am aware. But guess what? It seems like the vast majority of them are. Because whenever you look at any reporting coming out of Gaza, any of it, right? Doesn't matter who's filming it. The vast overwhelming majority of the time, even in the last 48 hours, we've seen them dancing and celebrating, not because of the end of the war. They've been dancing and celebrating with nonsensical songs like, oh, we defeated the enemy and now we're going to kill them all. Does that sound like people who want peace? Does that sound like the words of the people who supposedly went through a genocide and starvation, that they're out there eating baklava and handing out all kinds of, they're doing their usual lots of festivities and sweet foods after, something happens that they like. They're celebrating like crazy. By the way, they all look pretty well fed, and not the kind of well fed that's like, oh, they just put weight back on, but like they ain't lost weight during the last 2 years. They've been putting on weight. And they're all out there jumping and shouting and screaming jihad and Khaybar al Yahud, which, if you don't know what that means, it means that they want to basically eliminate the Jews the way that Muhammad did in Khaybar. Oh, look, a Smurf house. Gotta love the Smurf houses. And another little one. A little Smurf house right there. Yes, why not? Touch grass, right? They all say, touch grass. Well, there you go. Touching grass. So, is it possible that Gazans are simply going to de-radicalize themselves or be easily de-radicalized over the course of the next months or year? Very unlikely that it's going to take them less than a year to de-radicalize. I would say extremely unlikely. In fact, it is so improbable. It's like well beyond the 99.997% probability that it will not happen. But there's always miracles, right? There's always probabilities that things can happen that are unexpected. There are always outliers. Is it likely that they could be de-radicalized through getting rid of UNRWA's education curriculum, miseducation curriculum, and changing their education curriculum to not contain hateful messaging that teaches them literally to hate the Jews and to kill the Jews. Like, remember, that's like the actual United Nations gives money to the United Nations Relief Works Agency, UNRWA, to include books that specifically teach the people of Gaza and Judea and Samaria, the Arab people of Gaza, Judea, and Samaria, to hate Jews and want to kill them. That's the United Nations for you. Supposedly the peaceful seeking organization, right, of the world, right? Yeah, some peaceful seeking organization. How many other organizations? How many other education systems around the world does the UN sponsor and give them information to teach the people that are supposed refugees and teach them to hate their opponents and want to kill them all? The answer is zero. In case you're wondering, it's only the Palestinians who are abused in that way by the UN. Right? When people say they're pro-Palestinian, they're not. If they're at these rallies that they say they're pro-Palestinian, they're not pro-Palestinian. They are pro-terrorism. They are pro-prolonging oppressing the Palestinian people. Right? They say, "Oh, Israel has to stop occupying the Palestinians." Israel is the only country in the world that's actually doing anything and has ever actually done anything to help these Palestinian people. And, oh, how can you say that? They killed 60,000 people. Yeah, they killed 60,000 people, maybe, if those numbers are even real, because they're in a war. People die in wars. It is a horrible thing. It's one of the consequences of war is people die. It's a terrible thing. That's why we don't like war, right? That's why in Israel we try to avoid war. And as terrible and unfortunate as it is, and it is, it's also very telling that the people who say constantly, "Oh, stop attacking the Palestinians, etc., and give them their freedom," you want terrorists to run their lives. How stupid do you have to be? And why do you think we, Israel, should give supposed freedom? Right? Why should we give terrorists the ability to continue oppressing these people and causing so much hatred and violence in our neck of the woods? Would you want a nation full of terrorists literally at your doorstep? Or would you want a nation led by terrorists at your doorstep and having all of its people subjected to their massive and disgusting oppression and violence on a constant basis and brainwashing them to hate you, to come and kill you just because you exist? Oh, but the Jews stole the homes in the Nakba. No, the Jews did not steal the homes in the Nakba. In fact, it's the other way around. The Nakba happened because the Arab leaders told the Arabs to leave Israel. They said, "Leave and give us a few days to kill all the Jews, and then you can come back and take their homes." And if those facts hurt your feelings, well, so be it. Those are the facts, right? So they actually wanted to literally steal all the homes of all the Jews after they were all killed. That was their goal. That was their intention. The reason they called it a Nakba in the first place is because they were disappointed in themselves and in their leaders for failing to do their stated objective. Again, as I said, hey button, as I said, was purely a failure of their leadership to actually do the despicable and unthinkable things that they wanted to do. Right? They wanted to genocide the Jews. Right? That was their plan. And they were disappointed that they didn't get to do it. So they whine about it for the next 77 years. Boo hoo. Our leaders didn't kill all the Yehud, so we don't get to steal all their homes and all their things. Like, that's literally what people are complaining about. You need to realize how insane that is. Because it is definitely insane. Right? The inversion is insane. The inversion of the narrative is crazy, right? And nothing is ever going to be solved until that narrative inversion is corrected And the people who believe in those lies are re-educated to understand that they're believing lies, that they were misled and they were lied to and they were taught lies. Because you're never going to fix it as long as they believe this nonsense and hold all this hatred in their hearts and seek nothing more than to just kill Jews and destroy Israel. Right? There is no making peace long term with a group that is bent on destroying you. Right? It's not like Israel doesn't want peace. It's the Hamas that doesn't want peace. It's the Palestinians that don't want peace in general. And when you ask them, "Do you want peace?" and they say, "Oh, of course we all want peace," and then you ask them, "Well, does that mean you could live next to Israel?" They all say no. You ask them, "Could you live, peacefully inside of Israel?" No. So what do you mean by peace? We mean we want all of it. Well, that's not going to happen. So they're basically saying they're committing themselves to just fighting forever because they don't want to live in peace next to their neighbor, because in their ideology. And the only thing that's going to change that is if their religion changes. And I've been saying this for decades. Islam has to reform. Judaism reformed. Christianity reformed. Islam needs to reform too. There's no excuse for it to be stuck in the Middle Ages when all the other Abrahamic religions have all reformed. They've all done the necessary work to be not religions run by their darkest parts. And until Islam does that, there is no hope for a real peace. Right? They have to stop hating Jews and wanting to destroy Israel. There's no hope for a real peace if they can't get that out of their system. I've been saying that for decades and decades, long before the Declaration of Principles, and ever since. And the Declaration of Principles was all the proof you needed to see, and it was a huge mistake to even sign that document. More importantly, forget signing the document. It was a huge mistake to reward Arafat with all the trinkets and privileges of a so-called quasi, state in development, an authority or whatever, with his little silly uniform and his all his stupid medals and his Nobel Peace Prize for what? For launching terrorist attacks against Israel? For signing a document that says we want to achieve peace, but they didn't achieve peace. And then the first thing he did after he signed that document is he ordered waves of terrorist attacks against Israel while the ink was still wet on the document. There's no making peace with people who just want to kill you. You make peace with people after they stop wanting to kill you, after they surrender and they accept that they lost. Or if you're the loser, after the other side that's facing you wins and you accept that they've won. You can't, there is no, yes, enemies have to make peace, not friends. But enemies have to make peace only after they can accept that they both exist and that they will continue to both exist. That's what making peace is all about. And as long as the Hamas and the Palestinians in general refuse to accept that Israel exists and will continue to exist and will live in peace and security and prosperity here, there's no making peace. It's not even, it's a stupid discussion. It's an ignorant, not even juvenile, not even childish, infantile discussion. Right? Think about it. How many nations do you know that are fighting hot wars? End them by saying we're gonna keep fighting, but we're gonna sign a peace document. It doesn't happen, right? So whatever they may or may not agree to, whatever plan may or may not actually occur, whatever parts of the plan may or may not happen, it's frankly all ridiculous. That's why I've always said about this war, it's not going to end the way you think. And so far I'm right. The only two things that matter right now are making sure that the hostages come home, and Hamas lays down its weapons and gives power to some other organization that is not them, is not made up of the same people, even if it's under a different name. It cannot be the same people. And after that, nothing has changed. It is, whoa, it is vitally important for that resolution to happen. Like, we're not going to get anywhere forward as long as the people continue to have this kind of wild disagreement among them. This is crazy. I gotta return this to someone. Let me ask this guy. A second. סליחה? זה אתה?
לא.
לא? מצאתי את זה פה.
תקשיב, בטח יבוא לקחת את זה. תודה רבה.
Okay. Found an ID card. It should not be lost. That's messed up. Okay, well, can't put all that on there. That's messed up. Okay. 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 Well, I hope whoever's card that is comes and gets it back, because that is not the kind of thing that they should misplace. And I can't exactly take it because that would be not okay. Anyway, so yeah, that's the long and short of it, people. That is what I'm going to be telling you about today on this particular topic. And if you want to know more about what's going on this topic, just hit the follow or whatever subscribe button on YouTube here. Hit the like button, and of course I'll be bringing you more. But just bear in mind the big point of this video is this conflict is far from over. I know people in the American media love to say, "Oh, the war is resolved, peace is breaking out. Congratulations, Donald Trump." Look, congratulations, sure, congratulations, Donald Trump. He did do something quite astounding. If he can get these hostages or help get these hostages back home. Hasn't happened yet, but we're still waiting with bated breath to see that it will. But until it does, it has not happened. And even after it does, like I said, there is no resolution as long as there's still this conflict. There is no peace, right? You can call it a peace plan all you want, mister. It ain't no peace. You think that Hamas is suddenly going to be a friendly organization we can trust our kids with to babysit? No thanks. Hamas is still a terribly dangerous organization that we have to be vigilant about, that we cannot let our guard down about, that we still need to defend ourselves against. And by the way, the same goes for all the other Palestinians as well, who also are not pro-peace at all, which is the vast majority of them. And I know not all Palestinians are like this. I am fully aware of that. Right? I know a bunch of Palestinians who are not violent and not seeking to destroy Israel. I get that. Many of them, a lot of them, but not most of them. Unfortunately, most of them do side with the psychopathic viewpoints of things like Hamas or the Palestinian Authority's own violent extremists. Why do they consider Marwan Barghouti a national hero? national. They don't have a nation, but a hero to their people. They consider him a hero because he killed Jews in terrorist attacks. He plotted and coordinated, commanded suicide bombers and other murderers who killed Jews. And he's convicted of killing 5 Jews. And what does that mean? Well, that means that they view a mass murderer as a hero. What kind of peace are we going to have with the people who view a mass murderer as a hero? Not to sound depressing or anything, but being realistic. It is absurd to call this anything close to a peace deal. It's not a peace deal. It is a ceasefire. It's not even a truce, right? It's just a ceasefire in which hostages, alive and mostly dead, will be returned, repatriated to their country. And in exchange for 2,000 or so terrorists and other people who've been arrested during the course of the war for various security reasons. 2,000 in exchange for 48, 20 alive and 28 dead hostages, right? It is absurd to call this a peace deal. It is just absolutely absurd. So I am not one of these people saying that this is a peace deal, because it's not a peace deal. Okay? It's not even a truce. A truce, you could say, well, they're having a truce. They're going to stop fighting for now. They're going to continue working towards making the plan a real peace deal. Well, it's going to take a lot more effort than just saying you want it to be done. I'm talking about multiple generations of people who have been brainwashed in literally Nazi propaganda. And before that, by the way, where do you think the Nazis got their propaganda from? The Arabs who were anti-Semitic in the Middle East. Right? Like, no joke, Hitler took Arab propaganda, Arab anti-Semitic propaganda, in order to perfect his version of anti-Semitic propaganda for the Third Reich to use against the Jews. Look it up, learn some history. That's where the Germans got their propaganda toolkit from. So that's why Haj Amin al-Husseini, the so-called leader of the Palestinians, they weren't called the Palestinians back then, but the leader of the Arabs who lived in British Mandate Palestine at the time, that's why he was one of the highest paid Nazis during World War II, who lived in Berlin for most of World War II and spent a long time with Adolf Hitler, side by side, discussing plans to kill all the Jews right here in Israel. At the time, again, British Mandate Palestine, after he would have finished killing off all the Jews in Europe. It goes back farther than that. It goes back generations farther than that. In fact, it goes back to the time of Muhammad. Muhammad set a jihad upon the Jewish people, and it has never stopped from the time that he was alive. Never. They are still in that same jihad that he launched when he was alive. You think this is going to disappear in 5-10 years, like Europe was able to de-radicalize Nazis after 5 or 10 years? No. Nazis, yes, Europe has had also a very long history of anti-Semitism, but the extreme version of it, that was the culmination of what happened during World War II, that lasted for a relatively short period of time. That was a 15-year period from the early 1930s until 1945. Really from 1933 until 1945, but you could say he was building that up, from the late 20s and from 1930 on. So 15, 20 years that all that was happening, right? So it was relatively easy to de-radicalize the Germans, who also, by the way, are frankly far more literate than the Palestinian people at large, have read more than one book, right? Were leaders in culture and science and all kinds of arts and other things like that. And sure, they were extreme in their hatred of Jews, but that's because they were looking for scapegoats as opposed to actually finding something about the Jews to hate, right? That they saw as an opportunity to be hateful about. Is it here? It's always amazing when you look for random stuff, the kind of random stuff you might find. Sometimes when you're looking for a particular thing and you randomly find something else, and I have to go find the owners of these things to give it back to them. If I can find them, that would be great. So yeah, so we're talking about many generations, like 1400, 1500 years worth of brainwashing to hate Jews that needs to be undone. And in the case of the people who call themselves Palestinian, it's nearly that long from the time that this land was first conquered, right, by Muslim conquerors, invaders from Arabia, right, who came here, conquered the land, colonized it, forcefully converted people here to Islam. Right? Remember, many of the Palestinians, right, the Arabs who call themselves Palestinians, have Jewish DNA in their blood because they were literally Jews who were forced to convert to Islam. So how do you square that one? Right? We don't want to kill them. There are brothers and sisters who literally, unfortunately, they've been forced to convert many generations ago. Their ancestors were forced to convert many generations ago. And I view that as oh well, that's a sad fact of history. And I certainly don't want to kill them. I just want them to be de-radicalized so that we can live side by side in peace. Which is, by the way, what most people in Israel want. Right? Yeah, I know there's some crazy people who want to destroy all the whatever Arabs or all the Palestinians. This is nonsense talk. It's not the mainstream Israeli view, not even by a mile. It's way out of this, out of the league of the norms. There's nothing normal about that view in Israeli society. Are there extremists who hold that view? Sure. Are they the norm? No, not even close. The norm in Israel, right, the normal distribution of people, we are a people who seek peace. We want to live in peace next to our neighbors. We want to be prosperous next to our neighbors. We want them to prosper as well. And we believe we can create the greatest prosperity ever if we work together. Or at least if we have peaceful relations and normal exchanges of economic interests and cultural interests, etc., etc. So it's not up to Israel to decide to make peace. That's a complete nonsensical thing that people say, right? All the emotional crying and the wailing and the yelling of angry Arab mothers and fathers and children that you might see on TV is literally designed propaganda to pull at your heartstrings, to convince you to do things or believe things that are incorrect. It's really that simple. There is no like middle ground on this. There's nothing for Israelis to have to moderate about themselves for this to be a fact. Right? The Palestinians are the ones who need to change. Hello, I see messages here. Hello? Shalom. You think this also? Well, that's nice. Toda. Thank you. Like and subscribe. And tell your friends if you think I'm sharing good information. Like unfortunately, Israel faces an enemy that just simply has been brainwashed for so long that it will probably take conservatively about 3 to 5 generations to de-radicalize. Now, could it be done faster? Yeah, it could. Again, I point to Hassan, Mossab Hassan Youssef, or whatever, Mossab Youssef Hassan, who said, the Green Prince, if you don't know who he is, go look him up, who said, that his 2 years in an Israeli prison was enough time for him to see why their, society is terrible being led by organizations like Hamas, because they are carnival. They're just an evil ideology that just seeks to destroy and to kill. I think this is also happening in current. Yeah, this is unfortunately happening currently. They are still very much doing everything they can to advance their sick ideology. But again, voices like Mossab, who de-radicalized himself after seeing, the terrible things these people were doing to each other in prison. He gets it. He understands it. He sees exactly why these nut jobs are not people to make peace with, as long as they adhere to these violent ideologies. And they need to all de-radicalize themselves. But guess what? Most of them aren't going to. Some might. Most probably will not. That's just practical reality. So it's going to take some generations until those people who are full of hate in their hearts pass away, and the youngest of them, who are newborns now, begin to learn a different way forward. And that's not going to happen as long as they're living in the homes of their parents, who are teaching them the evil stuff, regardless of what they may learn a few hours a day in school. Because think about it. Sure, you can send a kid to school and you can give him a good curriculum and you can teach him not to hate. But then when he goes home, his parents tell him to disregard all that information when he's at home and to actually hate the people that he was taught not to hate. Who do you think he's going to listen to more? The teacher or the parents? Like, really, think about that. Who is the kid going to listen to more? Sure, in school they'll listen to the teacher because they have to. But when they're at home, which is most of their days, they're not going to do that. Right? They're going to listen to their parents. Because you get your values at home first. And then at school. And that's exactly what's going to happen. Right? You're going to have a bunch of kids who are educated in schools, hopefully teaching no hate, but that's still, we're a long way from even there. And then they're going to be at home being taught to hate. So how long is that going to take to change? Another 1 or 2 generations at least, until you got people who are at least like trained in both ways. So they're taught not to hate in school and to hate at home. So then the next generation is going to have to be taught again the same thing, not to hate in school. And when they come home, their parents are going to be like, well, I was taught not to hate in school, but also at home I was taught to hate. So that second generation is going to be like, well, I don't really want to hate anybody, but my parents are kind of like mixed on this, so I'm going to, be supportive of them. And that's going to go another generation. And then you're going to need another generation after that, until it's like, well, my grandparents used to hate Jews, but I really haven't had any reason to. So we're taught not to hate in school, and at home my parents would like me to hate Jews, but I'm not gonna because it's ridiculous. And then only one more generation after that, so like 4 generations, right, already, is gonna be like, yeah, I think once upon a time my great grandparents used to hate them, but we don't do that anymore, right? So now they're just like, we only just teach to not hate and to live in peace and coexistence. We're talking 4 generations, 80 years minimum. And by the time it's well entrenched and like all the psychopaths are completely out of the woodwork, like the vast majority of them, it's talking 5 generations, 6 generations. So 100 to 120 years. There's no getting around that. There is no shortcut. It's the time it's going to take. Now, again, could there be some great national movements to de-radicalize the people if all of the great Palestinian leaders were like, hey, we're all going to do this joint effort and massively de-radicalize everyone at once with some kind of an amazing movement? Sure. And the Messiah could come back tonight or tomorrow. but I ain't waiting up nights because it's unrealistic. So that's why, as much as I would love to say, yay, end of the war means there's going to be peace now. Yay, if Saudi Arabia joins the Abraham Accords means there's going to be peace now. It doesn't. Like, Abraham Accords, wonderful, great, I'm all for them. But the thing is, there's takia. If you don't know what that is, look it up. Right? They can lie and say anything to advance their cause, and then one day when they have enough power against you, stab you right in the back. That's part of their religion. As in, like, that's A-okay with them. They're fully allowed to lie about anything at any time to anyone, as long as it advances the ideology of their religion. I wish I was joking, but I'm not. So, if you tell me Saudi Arabia making peace with Israel is great for the, for the region, it is great for the region in many ways because it does actually help deconstruct the basis for the Sunni hatred against the Jews. But the fact is, many people will say, well, Saudi Arabia is not a caliphate, they're just a kingdom. And if they agree to make peace with Israel, then they're just apostates. And they will view the Saudi royal family as apostates. So it will not be respected by the average idiot on the street who's willing to lay down his life and be a shaheed, a martyr, through violent resistance, through terrorism, because he or she will have decided that the king of Saudi Arabia and his family are not actually believers, that they're heretics, they're apostates, they're blasphemers against Islam. So they will do anything to deny the authority of the kingdom of Saudi Arabia to say we have peace with Israel and the Jews. Let's live together in peace and harmony. They won't accept it. How do we know? Well, look at the peace deals Israel has so far. Egypt. The government is at peace with Israel. The people of Egypt are not. The average Egyptian hates Jews in Israel. Why? Because even to this day, the government of Israel feeds them hateful information about the Jews. To this day, the government of Israel, and the government of Egypt technically have peace, but the Egyptian government to this day promotes anti-Semitic content and, demeans anyone trying to show tolerance towards Israel. Why? Because they use it as a stick and as a diversion, right, to distract their own people from the failures of the Egyptian government. What are those failures? Well, you got 110 million people living in Egypt, mostly in shitty conditions because their government sucks at governing. Why? Well, because the Islamic Brotherhood, the Muslim Brotherhood, which is based in Egypt, has spent the better part of the last 70 years and more destroying the very fabric of society in Egypt and making them more and more Islamists. And I say again, they're not extreme Islamists. The people that are called Islamists or Salafists or radical Muslims, radical Islamists, they're not radical. I hate to break it to you, Western society. The people who are violent Islamists, they are the normal distribution of literalists. They are literalist Muslims. What does that mean? That means they read the Quran and they interpret it in a literal way. They are not radicals. They are doing what the Quran instructs them to do. The radicals are the ones who are willing to do things differently. The ones who are willing to say, you know what? We don't need to be violent assholes. Those are the real radicals. That's who the real radicals of Islam are. The ones that I can actually respect and see as people to make, to live alongside with peacefully. The ones who are willing to do things differently. And you'll find a lot of them in many countries where Islam is the norm, but most of them are repressed in some way, free to speak up or whatever it might be. There are very few Muslim societies where it's okay to be okay with Jews. Now, there are some, They can point to Bahrain. You could maybe point to UAE. I still wouldn't, but you can because we technically have peace with them. Um, and you can maybe point to some countries like some parts of Indonesia, not all of it, certainly, definitely not the majority, even though their head of state or whatever, head of government, recently said shalom in his speech, which was wonderful and fantastic. And even though he signed on to this ceasefire agreement, which is again wonderful and fantastic, but until that country actually makes a real peace with Israel and de-radicalizes its population from hating Israel, nothing's going to change. And what is necessary for that to happen? Again, the Muslim countries, the countries governed by Muslim governments, need to change their ways. They need to stop blaming other people for their problems. They need to stop scapegoating the Jews for their own problems. Okay? Jews are 0.2% of the population on the planet. To suggest that we control the world is beyond absurd. It is so ludicrous. It's like not even laughable. It's just like an absurdity that is ridiculous in every way, shape, and form. And I don't recommend trying to find logic there. All you have to understand, dig into it as much as you want, you will find this, right, is literally what I've been saying. Like, they are just so used to scapegoating other people to distract from their own problems, to not have to look in the mirror and say, oh, I screwed up, I have to fix this. Thank you for your comments there. Is it, how do you pronounce that? Gagan? Anyway, nice to have you here. It is just ludicrous to think, oh, all we got to do is sign a piece of paper and all these problems go away. I wish it was that simple, right? It'd be great. But it's very obvious that it's not, you know? So the best we're going to have in this situation is, if we're lucky, 3 years, maybe 5 years, maybe up to 15 years, if we're lucky, of a so-called ceasefire. But after that, if they don't renew that ceasefire, which they can do, but if they don't renew that ceasefire another 10 times in a row and go another 150 years or so without fighting with us, there's not going to be real peace. And again, ceasefire is not peace. It means we're going to have to be sitting on pins and needles for 150 years until they've demonstrated that they're no longer a violent people. That's just not going to happen in a practical, realistic world that we're living in. Like, it's not going to happen today. It's not going to happen next week. It's going to take, again, like I said, more than like a century or more to actually be so entrenched in their population that anybody who would think to be violent would look at them and say, what? Everybody else would look at them and say, what are you, crazy? Like, of course we're not going to do that. Why would we attack our neighbors? So, am I optimistic that the hostages will come home? And that I'm hopeful. I'm not optimistic because it hasn't happened yet. There's still 48 hostages being held in Gaza, as best we know. Is Trump going to come to town tomorrow and give some speech at the Knesset? Well, apparently, I don't know. He's going to give a speech apparently somewhere in Israel. Who knows if he's going to? I think he's not going to meet any of the hostages. Frankly, he shouldn't meet the hostages tomorrow. If it was up to me, I would say definitely don't do that. They can come and meet you at a later date if they want to. Don't put that kind of pressure on people who literally just got out of hell to suddenly have them standing in front of the President of the United States. Like, that's too much of an emotional and psychological shock. They don't need that. They need to go straight to the hospital and be looked after and meet with their families and, begin the process of healing, which takes time. And then when they visit the White House, if they're invited to do so, they could certainly go do that, whatever. That's fine. Why not? But there's absolutely no need or benefit for them to be meeting with President Trump tomorrow. I mean, that would just be just absurd. So again, am I hopeful that there's going to be that the Hamas is going to lay down their weapons? I'm not hopeful. I'm realistic, and I think they're probably going to try to find every way they can not to do that. I think they're going to try to find every way they can not to give up power. I think they're going to try to find every way they can to remain relevant in Gaza as a political force and a military force or a terrorist force, even though they agreed not to. Why do I think that? Because they always lie. That is what they do. They're not famous for being honest. They're famous for lying. They're famous for breaking their word and being violent about it. They're not famous, they're infamous. So do I think suddenly that, Hamas is going to be at peace with Israel after tomorrow? No. I hope I'm wrong, but no, I don't think that. I would love to be wrong about this. I would love to be wrong about this. But give me evidence to believe why this would happen. Show me any reason to believe that this is going to be over tomorrow if Israel gets back all the hostages, and even if Hamas lays down its weapons and surrenders power to some other organization. Show me any reason to believe that that's the end of the war for real. Like, yes, it can be technically part of. We can say it's the end of this phase of the war, and the kinetic fight is over for now, maybe. But I don't trust it as far as you can spit. As far as I can spit, I would not be saying, "Oh, we have peace now." No, we may have a situation in which the guns fall silent, which would be wonderful, would be great, but it'll be far, far, far from calling it peace. Now, do I think it's okay, or do I think Trump should get the Nobel Peace Prize maybe next year? Well, if the guns go silent and remain silent for at least a year, and there's no indication, I guess now for the next few months, because they make the decision in January, actually. So if between now and the end of January, whatever their deadline is to choose the next winner, which is really weird, by the way. Why do they choose the winner in January, but then only announce it in October? Like that's just stupid. But the Nobel Prize Committee, they gave a peace prize to Arafat, a terrorist, a lifelong terrorist. They gave a peace prize to Obama for literally not doing a thing. He didn't do anything. He was elected president of the United States, and they gave him a prize. What did he do? Literally nothing. They gave it to him on the hope that he might bring peace to something. What does that even mean? It's just so absurd that people give any credibility to that prize at all. You want to tell me the prize in chemistry, the prize in physics, the prize in literature, whatever? Sure, great, wonderful. Those are all actual discoveries or, advances, right, in the human condition, in things that are measurable in some way. But the Peace Prize, it's a complete joke. Sorry, but it just is. Ever since they gave it to Arafat for literally signing a piece of paper that he violated that day, like it's offensive. Is absurd. Anyway, let's go there for now. I will catch you all later. And I hope you all having a wonderful day. Whatever time it is, wherever you are, whatever you're doing. Hope it's great and that you're doing good and doing well. And I'll catch you guys later. Till the next one. Shalom. Peace.